Great. Fucking towards the ball.
That's the shit, my fours, mate. Seven now. Four, seven now.
Clubby. Oh yeah. What you get, mate? Yeah! Italia festa mojas! Messi! Yeah! The older one pissed all over that, mate. Nice. It's in cost. Come down. No way.
You didn't fucking. I fucking see that green one.
Look at that thing, monster. What a waste of fucking fuel, man. You got dicked, buddy. I was one of someone telling you about once. Listen to it, I can hear it from here. That does. Fucking move, man. What the fuck? Made me waste tape. Tere, man. Fucking dumb cunt. Get that pussy Chinese car out of here. Come on, man. Haydi be chaser. Nema. This cunt fucking.
This is the one I wanted.
Yeah?
Yeah. This is Brinda's brother-in-law.
Get rid of the rings, man.
Yeah. That's right, trust me. I'm not going to say nothing because it's taped.
One sick LA.
Fuck's wrong?
Don't come that car there or the
Fucking hold the money.
just can't.
Fucking dead.
Opa!
Look at the Mazda.
Geelong Picnic!
It took a 66. That's guns.
Follow me, bro! VS! Commodore!
That's my car. Just came at the best time, man.
Now the extra's
Woohoo!
actually sliding down. Told you to come down.
Truck's pissing me off.
Come on, Chief. Come on. We're on, man. On the squad, on the squad. Come on, man. Come on, man. You know what I mean, man. Come on. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on. Yes, Mike's on here, right?
Bigger. Försök! Piece of shit. Very shit. Stop.
За нищо и горе носка. Ой, колектор и колектор. You shouldn't have fucking it's got a sunroof, don't worry. Come on, man.
Hoppa! Turn back here, man. Yeah, what a horn, mate. Nothing better, man.
In Los Angeles, it's music's biggest night, the 42nd Annual Grammy Awards. To open our first show of the...
In the late 1960s, an Australian legend was created. It was a car, a homegrown Grand Tourer that was to change the way Australians looked at driving forever. Built for speed, it conquered mountains and captured the imagination of an entire generation. It started a legend that became known by two simple letters. This is the story of the Falcon GT. And the legend continues. By the 1960s, Australian society was undergoing rapid change. Women's lib, emergence of consumerism and the Vietnam War were transforming the sleepy land down under into a brave new world. Australia was on the verge of an economic boom, and people were eager to enjoy the pleasures denied to them by years of hard times. And like the rest of the world, we wanted cars. Fast cars.
Smooth and lively. New Falcon for 64, now priced with the lowest priced six-cylinder car. 64 Falcon with certified golden quality.
But we wanted more. We wanted cars like the ones in the American movies. And so a new type of car was created. Based on the standard Falcon, The powerful homegrown GT was to push the boundaries of motoring in Australia.
The high points of the history of the Falcon GT begin in 1967, of course, when there was just this car. It was a limited edition special, and Ford, as it were, put a toe in the water to see how this thing would go, and people rushed out to buy them, and it was a fantastic, magical car. And the racing thing went on after that, and of course then you've just got the images on the black and white television of Alan Moffat and his Phase 3 at Bathurst and racing against Peter Brock, and it's all that sort of stuff. You cannot separate the history of the cars from the history of the racing.
GT stands for Grand Tourer, and the XR GT was just that. It was a powerful vehicle, unlike any other Australian-produced car, with big road presence. The GT was first put to the test at Bathurst in 1967, raced in the Ford Works team under the leadership of Harry Firth.
There's no substitute for Kevin.
Racing with Harry was Fred Gibson.
Bathurst in those days was more a sport then than it is a business now. And I remember Harry towing the car up there. It was a works car behind a panel van on a trailer. And that's the way the works car was presented, sort of thing.
I picked out Fred Gibson. He's the up-and-coming young bloke who drove sports cars not very well. I thought I can make something of Fred. He seems to have the right answers. I rang him up. I said, get down here and we'll meet you at Bathurst and we'll do something about this race.
56 feet, tread on the pedal, and some $100,000 surges forward in a blue haze of burnt rubber.
This was the GT's racing debut.
Cross pit straight and the Falcons mean business. Is this showmanship or can they keep it going?
The Ford team pushed the pace all day.
5 years' history here suggests Mount Panorama is too tough for the big cars. Busted stub axles, overheating, brake failure or similar could be expected.
By the end of the day, it appeared that the hard work was paying off.
Nerves are wire-taut, the strain tremendous. Public largely unaware of the drama as Gagan gradually narrows Gibson's lead, second by second, lap by lap. And here's that vital pit stop. Gagan about 56 seconds behind. Less than an hour to go. Firth in control. Do nothing. No time to change drivers. Get that petrol in. 5 gallons. And go. Actual stop, 25 seconds. Still in front, but not by much. But these are the dying moments when drivers talk to their machines, coax them round. Here's the actual difference between Gibson and Gagan on the last lap. Gibson is the dark car up front. Holders, and you'll see Gagan in 53. There he goes, 11 seconds behind.
But, much to the dismay of Firth and Gibson, the checkered flag fell on the racing Gagan brothers.
But up in the tower, the cross-checking ARDC execs now more than suspect they've made a boo-boo.
But they dropped the flag on the Gagans. What's going on here? You know, so we find that they had run out of petrol, going around the corner up on the mountain straight, gone in the pit gate, ran through the back of the pits, and come out, been credited with another lap because they're in the pit lane, and filled up the pedal. Now that is totally and utterly not allowed. They should have been excluded.
Weeks later, officials rectified their mistake, but this was no real compensation for not being winner on the day.
And the thing that really bugged me is they wouldn't give me back the class ribbon. It wasn't ribbon, it was the principle of it.
With its maiden win, the GT made its mark on the Australian motor racing scene. With such euphoria surrounding the victory, it was no wonder that more than one person took responsibility for its creation.
That's controversial because I think really back in those days, Harry said like it was his creation and Bill Burke said it was his. But being the sort of guys they both were, I think they were both very much involved in the creation of the GT. And it was a creation of something like building a supercar.
Bill Burke was Assistant Managing Director of Ford Australia. Fresh from HQ in Detroit, he had a head full of ideas and petrol running through his veins.
Prior to the GT coming along, I described the Australian car scene as plain vanilla. Pretty blah. Matter of fact, when I first went to Australia, things like heaters being standard equipment was unheard of. We had no air conditioning in Australia. Of all places that should have air conditioning, it should be Australia. Our initial V8 builds were specifically for the police, the various state police departments, and it became very popular with the police. Once we got greater availability of V8 engines, we introduced it to the public, and the V8 was extremely popular. Was Ford Australia eager to sell V8 Falcons to the police? Absolutely. The police were clamoring for them.
We had the two police pursuit cars, and they were part of the XR program. They were in the program. They were probably a minor variant. It really only added, a fourth engine and a fifth gearbox. And so we demonstrated that, and then we thought, gee, this is not a bad car. So after the XR program was done and finished and the cars were actually in production, we took a production car and made up a prototype GT out of that, and then lowered it, put wider wheels on it, put better rubber, and a few things like that, and made a GT. So that was the start.
It was really my idea. I, of course, am American, and I found out in my, by that time, 3 years in Australia, that young Australians are crazy about cars. And I thought that, you know, giving it a GT badge and some Go Faster stripes and a few other little things might make it appeal to the young people.
The head of the racing team was eager to get his hands on this new, powerful car.
I used to take it up the road to Maryborough of a night time, and I'd put my cap on, you know, and you'd sit by the side of the road, and you'd pick some person up, whoosh, you know, behind him and sit there, and then you'd let him go. And a lot of people would have, you know, a lot of pitter-patter.
But the idea of a four-door sports car was not greeted with as much enthusiasm by the executives in head office in the US.
Did my US colleagues laugh at me because we had a four-door GT? Absolutely. Prior to our bringing out the Falcon GT, all GTs in the world were all two-door models. Certainly all those in the United States, and I believe all those in Europe.
And so a legend was born. Although the first GT was released to the public in only one colour, GT Gold, there were 6 specifically produced XR GTs painted silver with red racing stripes. These were the Gallagher 500 cars, made for the cigarette company Gallagher.
Itchy feet. Fascinating, isn't it?
Coming up, we go halfway around the world, 60 style.
10,500
And take a long look back at the way racing used to be.
Robert's car spins and crashes backwards down a steep slope.
The replacement for the XR was the XT. Australian built, its makers claim much of its heritage from the classic US Mustang.
More thunder, more Mustang. You won't need any spurs.
If Ford were testing the waters with the XR GT, they committed themselves 100% to the full-blown production car with the XT. The new XT GT was available in a range of colours, including white, zircon green, and candy apple red.
Surfers Paradise, Australia's leading tropical resort city. Motor racing presents the only real opposition to the standard attractions of golden Pacific beaches, beautiful bikinied girls, and a hectic but colourful nightlife.
The first big challenge for the XT GT was Queensland's Rothmans 12-hour race for saloon cars.
It's go, and the 42 drivers race to their cars in a traditional The Man stunt. Winning the moral-boosting foot race is Brisbane radio disc jockey Bill Gates. It'll prove to be some omen, because 12 long, tiring hours later, Gates and co-driver Jim Bertram will bring their Ford Falcon GT home in first place. The cars are near stock standard, only the most minor adjustments to engine, suspensions and exhaust systems have been allowed. Cars must have been manufactured or assembled in Australia. 200 examples of the particular make are required to have been registered for ordinary road use since January 1964.
This rule was common in Australian touring car racing at the time, and compared with today, simple and very effective.
Tyre wear is severe during the race, particularly in the first hours before the track is coated with oil and rubber. One pit-side statistician calculated that during practice and the actual race, more than 800 tyres are changed. Night, and rather than slackening, the pace intensifies. In the General Motors camp, the retirement of their top crews is causing long faces.
After 12 long hours, the flag fell on the Jim Bertram, Bill Gates team.
The flag goes down for the leading Falcon with Jim Bertram at the wheel, while Bill Gates, who drove most of the way, gets ready to join him in celebrating the win. Victory is sweet.
Racing in the 60s was a pretty innocent affair. There wasn't the pressure, the hype, or the safety measures.
When we raced in Bathurst in the 60s and the early 70s, there were no safety fences at all on the top of the mountain, or down the mountain for that matter. We used to, not knowingly, wear cotton racing gear, and our racing helmets were not very substantial, and our seat harnesses weren't like they are today. So we had a lot to learn in those days about safety.
Bathurst is so much safer circuit today than it was in them days. They had not a lot of safety arm car in them days. You could actually just drive off the top of the mountain if you got a little bit crossed up coming onto Skyline there, and you could actually fall off the side of the road. So I'm probably glad that that I'm racing in the era I am now.
But almost immediately after going over Skyline, Robert's car spins and crashes backwards down a steep slope. Although the car is a write-off, fortunately Roberts is only dazed.
The track, as you look back on the old days and look at the movies and the films of the race, it really was sort of back in the arcades, wasn't it? Like it was sort of wooden fences and no pits and things like that. And I think really we used to drive in sort of like those ties shirt sleeves and sort of helmets with leather sides and things. So it was old times.
During the GT heydays, there were some spectacular crashes at Bathurst, including this horrifying flip at Skyline.
Bill Brown's car flipped and became airborne when only a few cars had gone through. In the worst traffic jam the race has known, 15 cars banked up.
Bill Brown had a brush with death. If the GT's debut in '67 was a huge success, then Bathurst '68 was a real ordeal. Racing with Barry Bowe-Seaton that year in the Harry Firth Works GT was Fred Gibson.
Ford moves into first place. Close behind him, Des West.
Driving with Harry in '68 was really probably an education for both Bowe and I, because Harry was the team manager and we were the drivers. And I suppose, like, against the Monaros, I think it was the 327 Monaros, that they had miles more grunt than we had. So we had a great dice with all the Monaros. We'd pass them across the top of the mountain on the twisty bits, and they'd grunt past us down the straight and back up the hill again.
And after 41 laps, the pace has stepped up. With an incredible burst of speed, Des West shatters the old lap record by nearly 5 seconds.
But the expectations of the big, heavy GTs was too much, and the pressure soon took its toll.
Car 9 is still ahead, but just when the Ford camp's becoming confident, real trouble strikes the Gagan machine. The Falcon's disc brakes burn out. Replacement takes 16 minutes.
Brake and tyre hassles often plagued the GTs, but they weren't the only problems.
Then more trouble, and this time it's the leader, Barry Seaton, pulling in with a suspected blown head gasket. Time is running out and every second vital. A radiator refill, some rapid cooling, and the car is sent back onto the track. Now, miles behind, Gagan attempts a miracle. And it appears Harry Firth believes in them too as he orders more speed.
So it's one of those sort of days where, you know, they'd pass us and we'd pass them, and it went on and on all day until probably about 2 hours to go, and we had the upper hand and we were leading the race, and then Bowe was driving the car and got a stone through the radiator, and that put us out.
Then another blow in more ways than one, and this time Seaton is definitely out of the race.
This dashed all hopes of a GT victory at Bathurst.
Coming to the checkered flag, McPhee has broken the race record set last year by the Falcons. His time, 6 hours, 44 minutes, 7.9 seconds. For Bruce McPhee and co-driver Barry Mulholland, an outstanding performance in Australia's toughest car race.
The GTs might not have taken the checkered flag at Bathurst that year, but they certainly proved themselves in one of the most gruelling races ever devised. The 1968 London to Sydney Marathon.
Entrants came from all over the world. 98 cars in all, including 3 Australian Team Falcon GTs. Ahead, 10,500 grueling miles in 11 days through 11 countries. Off they go.
It really was an adventure of a lifetime. The ultimate road trip.
Here's an Australian Falcon GT arriving in Belgrade, being directed by police to the control points.
Driving a Falcon was 23-year-old Ian Vaughan, now a head honcho at Ford. But back in the 60s, he was one of the engineers.
Well, it was incredibly tough. We were going through countries like Yugoslavia, Iran, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan. The roads were really rough, and we didn't really know where we were going. These countries were pretty much uncharted in those days, and the navigation was difficult as well. Plus the problem of just millions of people on the road. When we were driving through India, for instance, the road was completely covered in people. The people would part in front of you as the car went roaring down the road.
That the cars were coming. People turned out in thousands to watch as they sped through Afghanistan, Pakistan and down through India. Sometimes it was almost impossible. Cars had to literally push people out of the way in order to get through. And getting through was vital.
You do get some amusing events along the way, particularly when you're driving 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which we were from London to Bombay. We actually carried a toilet in the car, would you believe? We didn't actually use it. That was in case somebody got deli belly. So in the end, when we got to India, we handed the toilet to a guy beside the road. He didn't know what to do with it either.
The cars were shipped from Bombay to Fremantle. But it was on home turf that Ian Vaughan started making inroads on the lead.
And going through in superb mechanical condition were the 3 Australian Falcon GTs.
Coming across Australia, seeing the progress up through the field. You know, one day we would be 13th and then 12th and then 11th and then working our way up through the field day by day. It was only 3 days across Australia, but we were ripping through the field as the more fragile cars, these Escorts and Porsches and cars like that from Europe were starting to show their fragility.
By the time the rally reached the final checkpoint at Warwick Farm, the XT GT had proven its worth. A brilliant third outright.
All 3 Team Falcons home as first, second and third Australian cars, winners of the team's prize, and filling 3 out of the first 8 outright placings.
Old memories die hard. 25 years later, Ian Vaughan was determined to get the XT GT to first place. In Scrub near Canberra, the original GT was taken for a bit of a spin to blow out the cobwebs.
Well, in 1993, the organisers decided they would run a 25-year anniversary of the event, so it was 25 years after 1968. What we had then was not 25-year-old drivers, but 50-year-old drivers, but we took the same car that we'd taken in 1968. You had to take a 25-year-old car. They were the rules of the event. So we had a race across the world, really, for 25-year-old cars, which was a little different. Well, there was a big difference. For instance, in the first rally, we'd been through Yugoslavia. We couldn't go through that now. We had to come down through Eastern Europe, through Czechoslovakia and into Turkey that way. In the first event, we'd gone through Iran and Afghanistan. This time, we couldn't go through that, so they put us all in an Antonov and flew us over. Flew us right over Afghanistan into India, and we continued on down through India. So I guess the political change was a little different there. The other thing that was really different about the second event was it was an out-and-out speed event. In 25 years, rallying had become a much faster sport, and we had to drive this car probably 25% faster than we'd had to drive it in the first place. So a real speed event, closed roads, or so-called closed roads in India, which is almost impossible, but time to 100th of a second and a much more competitive event. We're up against, again, the Porsches. They were 25-year-old Porsches, but pretty competitive, and there was one Porsche that pipped us at the finish. But we managed to get in second, which was a nice improvement on third 25 years ago. Well, London to Sydney's a long way. The next event that's scheduled is another 25-year anniversary in the year 2018. I think I'll be 76 then, and I may be just a little bit past it, but I'm sure the car will be ready to go again. It's certainly only just run in.
The XT GT proved itself worthy of the GT legend. To many experts, the XT was the best GT ever produced. Coming up, the master of Mount Panorama and the car that never was.
Ford, let it lead the way. Come and break our way.
1969 was the year of the Subaru.
New Falcon is here. The all excitement happening at your Ford dealers. Bold new Falcon.
The new XW GT was powered by a 351 cubic inch Windsor V8, which delivered an additional 60 horsepower. But with the XW GT came something else. Something that was going to change the face of motor racing forever.
Well, the HO was first of all a legend, what you have to understand. It was better than the standard XW because it was the car that they honed to go to Bathurst. And of course, they had to go around corners better than the standard GT because it was going to be driven by probably the most famous Falcon racer of all, Alan Moffat.
Canadian-born, Moffat had raced in the States in the 60s before being coaxed to join Ford Racing by its then motorsport manager, the big American Al Turner. Together, Moffat and Turner were the fathers of the GTHO.
My first involvement with a GTHO was fortunately to have been asked to drive one. But before we could drive one, we had to have one. And Al Turner, who had been brought out from America to supervise the program, asked me would I be in a position to build the prototype. And this sounds dramatic, but it wasn't all that hard for us because the shape of the car was still going to remain the same. So my two young fellows, Peter Thorne and Barry Nelson, just installed the engine, installed the gearbox, some special brakes on the back, and handmade the spoilers. So it was all quite a nice little package and looked very nifty for Al Turner to present to Ford management. He wanted a living, breathing, fire-eating machine that he could show to Bill Burke, who was the managing director at the time, into the car and give him a bit of a flamethrower ride up the Hume Highway. The program would be approved, and his rationale worked.
Moffat was soon at Bathurst, and he has vivid memories of the first time he saw the track.
We stopped on the top across Skyline, and in those days, no walls, barbed wire fences was the limit. And they said, look at the view. Isn't this fantastic? It's a fabulous sight, and it's terrific. And I've walked over to the edge of the circuit and looked out over the valley and seen Bathurst town and the ongoing hills and thought, this is really very nice. And then turned around and said to them, well, you know, aren't we a bit pressed for time? When are we going to get to the circuit? Let's get moving. And they said, you're on the circuit. I took one more glance over that valley, and that was the last time I ever looked left in my life along that shelf.
Moffat's main aim when he arrived in Australia was to conquer Mount Panorama.
My recollections of 1969 at Bathurst was, in hindsight, a pity that I didn't win it, because I felt I could have won it. I didn't actually know how to win it, and you may think that's a strange comment, but until you achieve a victory, you don't